What is the best approach to becoming compliant with HB 21-1110, otherwise known as the new Colorado Accessibility Law? That's what we'll be covering in this presentation. And let's start off with great news. I was looking over several local government websites and I noticed that WordPress is heavily used. I noticed that these are mostly informational websites. I noticed that the accessibility issues were fairly light on most of the websites. And I noticed that the documents available were fairly simple. These are all positive signs. This means the more of these bullet points that you have in your favor, it means the shorter the project is going to be, the easier it is going to be to complete, and the less costly it will be. So, all encouraging signs. So the first thing you need to do is you need to inventory your digital assets. And on this slide, I have website, documents, and software. And so that's where I would start with my website and my documents. And that's what I have on this next slide is I'm going to prioritize the website and the documents and then the software. And the key is going to be the digital assets that are publicly facing, the digital assets that are most frequently used. We want to make sure that we are remediating those first and making them fully WCAG conformant. I recommend outsourcing the work originally, and this is so you can get it done. Of course, we know there's a deadline. It's July 1st. It is rapidly approaching. There is less than 5 months. You don't have time to figure this out for yourself. So I recommend that you outsource and then you get to work on your end. And by the way, when I talk about outsourcing, the focus would be on the website. So we would outsource an audit where we find the issues and then remediation. And with documents, we're just straight remediating those. So in house, you should also be doing several things. And one of these is developing an accessibility plan if you haven't already done so. You should also work on an accessibility statement. And I would go ahead and post this, but when you're ready to publish it, it will be publicly facing and it will be likely, you will likely have a link to your accessibility statement on your footer. And then you will also work on an accessibility policy. And this is probably going to be an internal document. And it's going to include things like deadlines, who is responsible for what, and then your procurement process when you deem what your process is for vetting different products for accessibility. And so that's something else I would include in my accessibility policy. But think of an accessibility policy as really encompassing your organizational approach to accessibility, and think of a statement as really distilling everything down, putting that you are committed to, putting a statement that you are committed to accessibility, adding adding methods of contact, and then within a statement, you may also want to speak to your efforts. I recommend that you make it an accessibility statement more detailed, but the point is that you are working on all of these things while you have sourced out the material accessibility to a service provider. And then I would also work on accessibility training. And this is so once you've originally outsourced work, then you don't have to continually outsource work. Or if you do outsource work, you know exactly what you're outsourcing and you can limit how much you outsource because your team may already be trained on certain things. I also highly recommend that you document all of your efforts and you store all documents in a folder and you keep this folder available. And so this is so you can retrieve documentation. You can have all of your accessibility investments logged. You can have all of your improvements logged. You can have all of the work that you have done logged. And this way you can show that, yes, you are genuine in your commitment. If you are called, if this is needed for some reason or another, you will have this documentation available. And by the way, you'll continue to add to this documentation. So this could include a conformance statement. This could include a certification from a provider stating that your website is, for example, fully accessible or speaking to all the work that's been done. So there are many different types of documents, but my point is for all of your documentation, you want to have a folder where you store it. And then next we have the administration. So you want to appoint an accessibility coordinator, and this is going to be your point of contact. This is going to be the person who's really in charge of ensuring that everything becomes accessible and then remains accessible. But you also need to support your coordinators. You don't want to just appoint someone, especially because they're going to likely be performing other responsibilities. So you want to support your coordinator, not just leave them with everything, but really just make them the point of contact, make them the person that is facilitating accessibility, make them the person that is knowledgeable of accessibility, but then also work to support and help them as much as possible. I also may recommend that you maintain an accessibility calendar, and this can be as simple as having a Google Calendar where you have dates for what you've done, what you're working on, what the service provider deadline is, when you expect certain services to be completed, etc. So this calendar will help keep you organized, and you can have multiple people that have access to this calendar. You also want to implement an upload process for your content. So once we've reached the point where our website is accessible and all of our documents are accessible, we want to make sure that we are uploading content that is accessible. We want to make sure that we are creating accessible documents. So we want to have a process in place so that we don't get to this point where we've done all of this work and then we have someone who is writing a blog post or uploading a new document and they're introducing accessibility issues. So that's going to be really key. Now, what kind of cost can you expect? Well, $160 an hour is the rate I am seeing from the Office of Information Technology, and that's a fair rate in the marketplace. But to keep your costs lower, I recommend that you gravitate towards a la carte services. So services that you can purchase as a one-time purchase. And then that's what I have on the next bullet point. Focus in on one-time costs because there are many subscriptions available, but you don't actually need a subscription for many things. And if you do want to get services on an interval basis, you can get those services one at a time. So you don't need to go ahead and sign up for 3 years of something. And I also recommend that you not purchase anything based on a scan because you can use scans for free. And this is something that you won't have to pay a subscription for. And so you just need to understand what the value of a scan actually is. If you are concerned with the reporting, then this is something where you can just log your accessibility issues found on free scans and then add those to a Google Doc and then have those there. So keep in mind that scans are limited. Many people focus in on scans and they centralize their efforts and their documentation and their progress around scans, but it's really skewed because scans are limited. Remember, scans can only flag approximately 25% of accessibility issues per WCAG 2.1 AA. So it really is a distorted view of your accessibility. And this is something that you can easily chart for free. And then, of course, we know that there are many free tools available, and the WebAIM Wave Scan is available for free, and you can use that as much as you'd like. So there's no need to pay for scans, and it's unlikely that you would need a subscription to anything. Of course, if it's returning value, then it's worth it, but just keep that in mind. So for timeline with a website audit, it's probably going to take 3 to 5 weeks. With remediation, it's around the same timeline, 3 to 5 weeks. And then with document remediation, this can take anywhere from 3 to 7 weeks. Sometimes if these are easier projects, you can get them back even sooner. But what I'm giving you here are realistic, conservative timelines that you can expect for most digital assets. And then with accessibility intervals, how often should you be for example, scanning your website? Well, I recommend a monthly scan, because if you scan any more than that, it's really not necessary. And again, if we've got to the point where we've remediated our website, we shouldn't need to be continually scanning it every day or every week, because we would only need to do so if we know there are new accessibility issues. And as I talked about earlier, we want to establish processes so that we're not introducing accessibility issues. Now, how often should you audit your website? I think annually is a fine interval, or even once every 2 years can work. It really depends on how much your website is changing. If your website is completely redesigned, if you've edited a lot of code, if you've uploaded a lot of content, if there have been some dramatic changes, then yes, you may want to opt for an audit sooner rather than later. But you shouldn't need to continually audit your website. And this is a full audit that I am referring to. It is not a scan, it is a full manual audit. The word manual is always implicit in the word audit, but sometimes the word audit is applied to scans. Sometimes the word audit is conflated with user testing. And so I just want to be clear that an audit is always fully manual. And with remediation, you're going to have that based on the audit. So if you're auditing annually and you're finding accessibility issues, then you'd want to accompany that with remediation and make sure that you do indeed finish off remediation so that there are no accessibility issues outstanding. With user testing, if you go this route, so with user testing, you have an accessibility professional with one or more disabilities who is testing your website, usually with assistive technology. This is recommended. It's not absolutely necessary, but it can be very helpful, especially when you document this effort, because you are demonstrating that your website or your different digital assets are indeed practically usable, practically accessible. So it can be highly beneficial. And again, the interval here is likely annually. It really does depend on what you prefer, but likely annually. And then with training, I have this as biannual, because we want to make sure that everybody in the office, everybody in the organization who is touching code, who is uploading content, who has anything to do with digital assets, even if they're just procuring assets, we want them to become mini experts in accessibility in themselves. So you want to make sure that the training is up to date. You want to make sure that everybody is knowledgeable and well-versed in accessibility. So I have twice a year for training. And then I have here a repeat slide on service intervals. So I'll go ahead and skip that. But just to remember that when we're looking at an audit, we're looking at remediation, generally we're looking at 3 to 5 weeks. Sometimes it could be more if it's an extensive project. For example, if you've got a lot of PDFs, then of course the project can go on longer. But generally, that's the timeline you're looking at. So if you get started now and you're working on compliance, you shouldn't have a problem finishing by the July 1st deadline. So on this slide, I have some recommendations as you are working towards compliance. First, I would utilize the Colorado Office of Information Technology heavily. They have opened themselves and made themselves available as a resource. They are a very helpful resource. They can guide you on what are best practices. They can guide you on what they think is best. Remember that they have set out the standards that we need to meet for compliance with HB 21-1110. So they are a tremendous resource. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out to them. And I would source services and then work on the administrative tasks at the same time. So have someone working on your website's accessibility, on your documents accessibility, and while they're working, you can also work on setting up your office so that your organization is producing accessible assets and is well versed on accessibility, and that you have everything in place so that you can move forward with efficient processes, effective processes. And of course, within that, we want to make sure that we're not only like within efficiency, we want to make sure that we are cost effective, and we also want to make sure that this is not taking accessibility is not taking any longer than is necessary. So that's what I have on this next bullet point, is to work concurrently. So you're working side by side. And then when you are sourcing services, make sure to factor in price, the speed, the return time of the service, but also the rapport that you have with the service provider. Because if you get the wrong vendor, it is going to be extremely harmful to your efforts, and it is going to set you back, and you're going to have spent a lot of money and have very little to show for it. And this happens all of the time, especially with document remediation, because with document accessibility, different people have different ideas on how far to take accessibility. And I can tell you that there are vendors that will go to, let's say, a 5 of 10, and so they will remediate your documents up to a certain point, but they will go no further because it requires more advanced technical expertise, or just more efforts. So they stop at a certain point. So and I will just give you this: with PDFs, you want to strive for PDF UA conformance. So that's where you want to be. So just know that if you choose the wrong vendor, it is going to set you back, and you are going to waste a lot of money. I also recommend, if you are working on the accessibility of your hardware or software or any other digital products, that you also get it's commonly referred to as a VPAT, but it is technically an accessibility conformance report. Make sure to get this report along with the accessibility efforts, because there's no reason that you can't have a vendor auditing your digital products and services and then also get their documentation on that audit. So with the ACR, it's really going to be an accounting of the accessibility. And if you go ahead and make the hardware and or the software accessible, then you will have a fully clean ACR where you have documentation that states that your website is conformant for all of these different accessibility, for all of these different success criteria in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Continuing on with recommendations, I would require training for my digital team. I would also consult with the Office of Information Technology, and I would also seek out a consultant for guidance if I felt like I needed more guidance, because you want to get this right the first time. And that's my next bullet point. Get projects done right the first time. I have seen so many really, really companies absolutely waste tens of thousands of dollars and make little to no progress, despite spending so much time and money because they didn't choose the right vendor. So it's very important that you get this done right the first time. And that's why I have consulting with the Office of Information Technology, actually going out and hiring a consultant, because you want to make sure that your efforts are moving in the right direction. It's also very important to pay attention to detail. Details are everything in accessibility. So you need to pay attention to detail. And then I also have here, do not source to Fiverr. And really, it's not so much specifically that there couldn't be someone who is excellent on Fiverr. There are some good providers, but generally there are a lot of providers that are providing false promises, or they're under delivering, or they're giving you a false expectation of price. Just know that if it feels like you're paying too, like if the price doesn't seem right, then you just have to question, am I actually getting back the full service? So that's really the point with my last bullet point. For training, I do offer training. I have training on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and this is going to include version 2.1 Conformance Level AA. And what this training will do is it will fully explain each success criterion that comprises the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I also have training that will help your team know how to conduct a basic website accessibility audit. And then I also have training on WordPress accessibility. So accessibility specific to the WordPress dashboard and WordPress content uploads, etc. So all of this training is available at adacompliance.net. I also offer done-for-you services, and these services are provided through accessible.org. So you can get an audit, you can get code remediation, And this is where we are going in and we are taking the technical, like the most technical aspects of accessibility, and we are fixing them on your website. You can also get remediation. You can also get user testing, and that user testing session will be recorded so that you can have documentation that your digital assets are accessible. And there is even content remediation at your option. So, and content remediation is going to include PowerPoints, it's going to include Excel spreadsheets, it's going to include PDFs, it's going to include Word documents, videos, audio files, etc. So, all of these services are available at accessible.org. And then I also have here a slide for the Office of Information Technology. And of course, this is available at oit.colorado.gov. And here, I highly recommend you look into the services provided, and not only the cost. As I mentioned, I think the rate is $160, but also the timeline, how fast they can return your digital assets, and then whether or not they can return documentation. But I like relying on the Office of Information Technology, and this is not speaking. Obviously, I'm not a state agency or a local government entity, but if I needed to be in compliance with this law, I would rely upon the Office of Information Technology as much as possible, because really here you are showing that you are diligent, that you are making the effort to be accessible, that you are in constant communication with the Office of Information Technology. And again, they are setting out the standards. So it's really good if you are in communication with them, you are working with them, and you are making sure that they know that you're making an effort on accessibility. Of course, they're not going to be the ones that are bringing civil lawsuits, but you're working with them, your documentation of your work with them, it can only be beneficial. And then the last here, I have consulting. I myself am available for consulting. So is my team. We can help you with the technical aspects and understanding the technical aspects of accessibility. So we can help with your plan. We can help with your accessibility policy. We can help with how you approach. We can help you with organizing efforts. And all of these consulting services are available at accessible.org. And so that's the presentation. I will include links in the description. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.